Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney, and today I have my February wrap-up. So February was a really great month. I started off with 10 prompts. I had 8 extras and 3 rollovers, and as you'll see behind me, I did read 17 books. So I didn't get to everything, but I had a really great month. And I did add on a bunch of extras, which didn't help with getting to everything. But yeah, I'm really pleased. It was kind of a weird month, and like it felt like 2 separate months, because the beginning of the month, like the first 2 weeks, I read romance mainly, and then I kind of transitioned reading dark romance and then into fantasy. And so it really felt like 2 different reading months theme-wise, but I had just such a great time, and we're gonna go over all the books I read. So if you're new to my channel, the way I do my wrap-up, I go ahead and go through the stats, and then I go from the books I didn't get to, and then from the bottom all the way to the top by star rating. And then I also have a top 3, which doesn't necessarily correspond with star rating. It's more the books that really stuck out, and are going to kind of stick with me. So let's go ahead and go over stats first. So let's see here, I'm on the wrong page. We had, so page count was 5,291. 14 of those were physical. I had 1 ebook and I had 2 audiobooks. Audio hours was 23 hours and 19 minutes. All the books I read were fiction. I did not have any nonfiction, and I only had 1 reread. My top moods were funny, adventurous, and then we have another tie for third, which was mysterious, emotional, and dark. Genres, again, these overlap, so some books fit multiple genres. But we had 9 romance, 8 fantasy, 7 contemporary, 2 dystopian, 1 erotica, 1 LGBTQIA+, 1 young adult, 1 short stories, 1 science fiction, and 1 literary. So my average page count per day was 188.96, and my average audio was 49.96 minutes per day. So let's go ahead and get into it. So we have 2 books that I've been trying to read because I got them for Christmas. So I've just been trying to squeeze them in, but they're low priority because they haven't been officially put on the TBR. And so those 2 books, again, I did not get to. And that is A Hoppy Survival Kit by Thomas E. Males. My mother-in-law gave this to me. She gave me 2 books. And I really am interested in reading them, but like I said, they're just not on the TBR officially. And so they're going to continue to roll over, and I'm going to continue to try to get to them. So there's that one. The other one I got from my brother-in-law and his fiance, and that is Lightlark by Alex Astor. This is the first in the series, and again, just lower priority because it's not officially on the TBR, but I do like to try to prioritize any books I get as presents for like Christmas and such. So this one will continue to roll over, and hopefully I will be able to get to it soon. Then we had the pick for Autism Reads, which is put on by Christine and an Autistic Reader. Their channel will be linked down below, of course. And I haven't been doing so well on participating. I kind of fell off the wagon the end of last year, which this year before I did the same thing. The end of the year, I just really had trouble. But one of the books I'm going to be talking about that I read was actually for January, and then I didn't get to February's pick. And that's The State of Grace by Rachel Lucas. So Autism Reads, all these authors are confirmed to be autistic, and the way Christine is doing it, she does an adult, young adult, and then middle grades. So this is a young adult book. And yeah, I didn't get to it, but I still want to. So this one will be rolling over as well. It's really short, and so it should be a quick read, especially being young adult. And so I'm definitely planning on squeezing it in March. And then the other one is the only one from my game that I didn't get to. And so the prompt for this one was a bookworm. I never want to debut novel. It never wants to. There it goes. Focus when I film later in the afternoon. But it's debut novel. And so this is the only one I didn't get to from my game, and kind of my punishment is generally the books I don't get to from my game specifically. I need to pick one of those to roll over and read before I start on the next month's TBR. This is the only book I didn't get to, so it will be rolling over. However, I'm not gonna make myself read it before I start on March's TBR because I have some video projects going, and so that doesn't really work for me, but I will make sure I read it in March. And then another punishment, I don't really punish myself, I did for February, because I didn't finish January, is I randomized my own TBR and read a book from there because I didn't have any books that I wanted to roll over from my game for that. So anyway, this book is The Book of Elsewhere by Keanu Reeves and China Mieville, or Mieville. And yeah, I still, like I said, I still really want to read it, so I will be rolling this over, and I will make sure I read it in March. It just won't necessarily be the first book I read. I am going to try to read it this first week, though. So there is that one. So all those books are going to be rolling over, but again, other than The Book of Elsewhere, they're kind of lower priority, so if I can get to them, great. If not, oh well. And so that's the only books I did not get to at all. And then I did not have any DNFs, which for my purposes, DNFs are my 1 stars. I don't rate them on Goodreads or Storygraph, but for my journal, they're the 1 stars because they were so bad I couldn't get through them or whatever reason. I didn't like the writing style or whatever. I also did not have any 2 stars, which is fantastic, and I only had 3 stars. So kind of bottom of the barrel here. This one was for Bambi, and it was spring or summer romance, and love this prompt. And so for that one, I went with Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. And this starts the first chapter, the prologue's February, but the first chapter is in April, which I definitely think counts as spring. So in this one you have Sally, and she works for the Night Owls. She's a writer for the Night Owls, which is basically SNL in this book. And she does a skit, and basically 3 of her male co-workers have gotten together with some of the famous guests that have come on. And so she does a skit basically saying, yeah, mega famous, like mega hot women will get with an average Joe man, but the reverse would never be true. A mega famous, mega hot man would never get with an average Joe woman. So she does this skit, and when she writes that skit, that week's host is this musician who likes her and is attracted to her. And so basically she kind of sabotages that, and then it takes place over through email correspondence, which I found mixed media really, really works for me. I absolutely love it. But in this case, I didn't really like the writing. And it wasn't so much the writing, which is why it got 3 stars. It's probably more of a 2 star for me personally. But the writing really was fine. And so I gave it 3 stars, understanding that it just really wasn't my cup of tea. But basically, I'm not a fan of SNL. I've never really watched it. When I see clips of it, I don't find it funny. I don't like the humor. And so you have a lot of that humor in here, which I don't like. The author, a lot of romance books or whatever take place in the real world, and they might reference, I hate contemporary romance that reference pop culture references and such. But in this case, she was actually referencing, it was too real. She was actually referencing political things that happened during this time period and like other things that happened during this time period. So there was a social commentary aspect which I could appreciate, but I didn't like that it was referencing real events. I did not like that at all. It also takes place largely, the second part takes place largely during the pandemic, and so again, another real world event that happened. And this is my second book I've read with that in here, and it's just not my favorite. I don't like, it's not like a trigger warning. I don't like absolutely hate it, but it's not my favorite thing. The other book, I didn't particularly love it, but it wasn't really obnoxious. And in this book, it plays a prevalent part and it makes sense for the story. And that's why, they're kind of emailing back and forth. And so, yeah, just a lot of like the writing choices I didn't personally appreciate. I did like the couple in the beginning, but then kind of the conflict and the way it played out, I wasn't a huge fan of either. And so that's why this one kind of got 3 stars. Like I said, for me personally, it might be even lower, closer to 2 stars. But I think writing wise, it got I upped it to 3 stars because it was more like personal taste. So there is that one. The next book that got 3 stars, which I'm very, very upset about, by the way, is The Mirror by Nora Roberts. So Nora Roberts is my favorite author. I have her complete collection of books. Like, I have every book she's ever written. And this is the second book in the Lost Bride trilogy, which came out in November, the end of November. And my husband and I read these books together. We were started with just series, and then now we're reading. She has a romantic suspense standalone that comes out in May, and we're reading those together as well. And I think she was born in 50, so she's 75 now. And honestly, I think she needs to either slow down or just retire because the last few books have not been good. The last series wasn't great. The romantic suspense last time wasn't great. And this book, the first book in the series, was very slow, but you at least have some stuff happening. And then the ending, I was like, wow, that ending, like, it's really setting up, like, it's really going to take off in book 2. Nothing happens in this book. Nothing. So basically, in this book, you have Sonia, and she inherits this house from an uncle who's the twin brother of her father that she knew nothing about. Her father didn't know about it, nothing. And basically, that family line, they have this house, and it's called the Lost Bride Manor because 7 brides have died in the house, and there is a curse, and there's this evil witch that places this curse and kills off these brides and steals their wedding ring. And so she's now in this house and she's gonna have to try to break this curse. There is a mirror that plays a part, hence the mirror. And yeah, she falls in love with the son, the youngest lawyer of this family law firm, that kind of represents everything. And she falls in love with him. The romance didn't progress at all in this book. She has her best friend Cleo who moves in with her, and then her cousin Trey is a big player as well. And yeah, the plot didn't progress. The romance didn't progress. It is basically daily life over and over and over and over again. It still gets 3 stars because I'm very comfortable with Nora Roberts' writing style. Obviously, she's my favorite author. So there is kind of this comforting aspect reading her works, but it was just so boring and I was so disappointed. And like, no progression, so I'm hoping book 3 will be good because everything needs to be taken care of in book 3 because nothing happened in this one. So yeah, very, 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 very disappointed. And like I said, it's been her last series was extremely slow. And I think like basically they're pushing out the series that could be a one book a one-off book. And she's dragging it out into series because that's what she does. Her series comes out in November and her standalone comes out in May, and so she's making these into series when they don't need to be. And I did read something recently, it just kind of popped up on recommended for you, and she treats writing as it is a job, but she treats it as like a 9 to 5 type job. She sits down and she writes every day regardless. And I think it's starting to show. Like I don't think she has the inspiration for the stories, and I think she's just pushing books out just to push books out. And like I said, she's 75 now. Like, maybe it's time to slow down. You don't need to do 3 books a year, because she also has her In Death series as JD Robb, which I don't read those. I'm just her Nora Roberts books. And so, yeah, I'm very, very disappointed about that. So we'll see. She has another, of course, romantic suspense coming out in May that will pick up, of course. And then the 3rd book will be out in November. And so we'll see how it wraps up. But right now, I'm very, very, very disappointed. Then the last one that got 3 stars, this was for my character prompt because we got Eeyore, which is to read a literary or a dystopian, and I chose The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This book, I have 2 separate feelings. I loved the pacing. It's very, very slow paced. It reminded me of The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, like kind of that slow, just daily toil. That's what it reminded me. I love the pacing. I love the premise of it. You have this dystopian world, and you have this man and his son, and they're walking on this road, trying to head south and get away from the cruel winter in this dystopian landscape. But of course, there's dangers on the road. There's other people who have resorted to cannibalism, and there's injuries and illnesses and such. So they're facing these challenges on top, plus being cold and not finding food and starving and whatnot. And so I like that aspect. I did not like the writing or the format. The format I could overlook if I enjoyed the writing, because basically it's told in little paragraph snippets. And so I could have overlooked that. Like, I've had other books that I've read. It's not my favorite format, but I've had other books I've read and I have enjoyed regardless. But the writing, he relies a lot on metaphors and similes and such. And if it would have been more plain speaking, I would have absolutely loved this book. But a lot of metaphors, some of them don't even make sense. He transitions from dreams and memories to present day, and that's not always clear. Sometimes it's all in one paragraph, and you're like, wait, am I in a dream, a memory? Are you reflecting on a memory? Are you dreaming something? Or is it present day? I have no clue. Some of the phrasing was really weird. A word would be placed at the end instead of where it should have been. Just kind of odd phrasing and such. And so that's why it only got 3 stars from me, because I did not like the writing. And I'm not a big fan of the format, but I did like the vibes of it, and it did make me cry at the end. So there's that. And then the ending, it's just kind of huh? Who are these people? What's happening? I don't know. So yeah, 3 stars for me. I am going to keep it, even though I didn't love the writing, because I did like the story itself and the premise of the book. So there's that one. Then we have our first 4-star, which we had 9 4-stars. And so the bottom of the barrel, there was an extra one I put on because it's the first in a series, and the second book worked for one of my game prompts. And so I decided, you know what? It's February. I want to read romance, and this way I can read the first book and then read the second book. And so that's The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. Overall, really, really enjoyed this one. So basically, you have Jessica. And she is a single mom, and she's just focused on raising her daughter. She has no interest in really dating or anything like that. And her friend Fizzy, who's the main character of the second book, kind of convinces her there's this new dating app that uses your DNA to find your soulmate. And so kind of on a whim, she ends up sending her DNA, but she wasn't really planning on actually doing it. Well, she gets matched with like the lead scientist, who is somebody who frequents the coffee shop her and her friend go to kind of do their work, because she's a freelancer, her friend's a romance writer. So they go to this coffee shop to do their work, and there's this guy who comes in on the exact same time every morning, doesn't talk to anybody, not friendly, just kind of grumpy, gets his coffee and books it. Well, he's the lead scientist, and they get matched. And so she's like, absolutely not. Like, they had, she had a couple of conversations with this guy, and he's just grumpy, and she's like, no, like, nope, absolutely not. Well, the company's like, this is the highest match we've ever had. Like, we'll pay you. Just give it a chance. We'll pay you, and you can date him, for like 3 months. And we'll pay you for it. And so she does. So it's kind of fake dating. There's doing promos and such for the company and for the launch. And yeah, I enjoyed it overall. My problem with this one was kind of the ending. The way it played out, it didn't really feel true. Like, it did, like, I see where the authors were going, because it's, Christina Lauren is two authors. I see where they were going, but the way they did it didn't really feel true to this character. Because yeah, he's, kind of standoffish and aloof and such, but he really has a kind heart, and you see that throughout the book. But then the way the ending played out, like, I see what they were doing, I just think they kind of did it wrong. And so the kind of that miscommunication and the way it played out, I did not like, and it made that character less likable. And so that kind of dropped it down for me. So there is that one. Then we had this one was, I had one unusable disc, so the book needed to deal with the number one in some way, and this is a standalone. And then it's also for my genre-a-thon, which genre-a-thon is my readathon that I put on. It's a year-long readathon, and each month is focused on a different genre or genre-adjacent prompt. And so for February, it was The Language of Love, which I've done, the past 2 years to read a poetry, but this year I also added on or an epistolary book. And this book popped up, and that's Where'd You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple. And this one, I had a really good time with it. The only reason it didn't get 5 stars is it does get a bit rambly at points, and it is a little bit over the top. And so basically, you have Bernadette, and her daughter B gets its S's, but basically straight A's, and they agreed, she could ask for whatever she wanted if she got straight A's. And so she does, and so she wants to take this trip to Antarctica. Her mom has a lot of mental health issues and is a little bit agoraphobic, extreme social anxiety, and so she kind of throws herself, like, I gotta do it for B, throws herself into planning this trip to Antarctica, and some things kind of happen. She gets a little bit overwhelmed, and so she ends up just kind of disappearing, and nobody knows what happens to her. And so the story is told and written like B's compiling this book. So she has all this correspondence that somebody sent her, and so she's putting it together, and then she kind of interjects her thoughts here and there, and she's writing this book, trying to figure out where her mom went. And so yeah, I really enjoyed it. Again, you kind of have that mixed media epistolary aspect, which I loved. I like I said, I found that really, really works for me. And like I said, the only reason it didn't get the 5 stars is because it does, when Bernadette, some of her correspondence gets a little bit rambly, and then some of B's points get a little rambly as well, and I didn't love that. But I overall really, really enjoyed this. There's a subtle humor there that I really enjoyed. I could really relate to the mental health aspect, which I marked one spot, and I do want to just kind of read that for you guys. So she's talking about how sometimes at night, like, she really struggles to sleep and like the anxiety just ramps up, and so like she'll be thinking like, oh, I need to make sure I pack more fresh fruit into Bee's lunch, and then at night I'll be like, I've got to pack fresh fruit into Bee's lunch. I can feel the irrationality and anxiety draining my store of energy like a battery operated race car grinding away in the corner. This is energy I will need to get through the next day, but I just lie in bed and watch it burn, and with it any hope for a productive tomorrow. There go the dishes, there goes the grocery store, there goes the exercise, there goes bringing in the garbage can, there goes basic human kindness. I wake up in a sweat so thorough, I sleep with a pitcher of water by the bed, or I might die of dehydration. And I just think that really captures, kind of what it's like, and kind of the essence of spoon theory, which, if you don't know, spoon theory was created for like people with chronic illness, kind of explain to other people like the lack of energy you have. And some days you just don't have enough spoon, and when you can't sleep, like, those spoons just get taken away, and you do like the simple things, the simple chores just go out the window. And I really, really like that line, so really love that. Then we had a reread. So this was for the game, and it was actually a bookworm, and it was reread. So there's that one. I know it's not really focusing, but you can read that. So reread, and I went with The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. This was Autism Reads pick for January. So I got to it in February. I don't remember what I originally rated this, but it gave it a 4-star this time. And love the autism rep. Like, the autism rep is fantastic. I really related with a lot of it. And the biggest reason why this doesn't get a 5-star for me is kind of the main male character. I think his name is Michael. So basically, you have Stella, and she has autism. She is autistic, and her mom mentions that she wants grandbabies, and so she's thinking, oh great, I'm not good at relationships, I'm not good at physical intimacy, so she decides to hire a male escort to try to get better at physical intimacy, to hopefully try to develop a relationship with a man. And so she hires Michael. Michael is working as an escort to kind of support his family. And so, his mom is sick, and then his dad has run off and also incurred a lot of debt. And so he's working as an escort to support his family. But his real passion is designing clothes, and then his family owns like a dry cleaning business. And so he's the escort, and of course it's a romance, so they end up falling in love and developing feelings. My biggest problem with this is Michael, his fear of being like his father. I just think that was really, really, really overdone. Like, I could see it, I can understand it, but I think it was just a little bit too overdone on that aspect. And then kind of a little bit of the miscommunication at the end I didn't love either. But such a great read. If you're looking for a good book with autism rep, this is definitely one. Along with the whole series, I've read the other 2 books. They're companion novels, so you can kind of read them standalone, but I've read all of them and loved every single one. But definitely great autism rep here. Then we have, this one was an extra. It was actually my family book club's pick, because we're doing a family book club for the first time this year. And this was the pick for that, and that was Her Soul to Take by Harley LaRue, which is book 1 in the Souls trilogy. And overall, I loved this book. Like, it had all the vibes. Our main character, Ray, she does like paranormal YouTube videos. There's a mining component, like an abandoned mine, which I loved, and that's kind of a theme during this month. And I love the plot line, like the main plot. So basically, Ray comes back into town. Her family, she grew up there, but her dad moved them away to California. Her parents are moving across the sea, and so she goes back to her hometown to finish out college. But there is this cult, and they are basically trying to sacrifice her, which kind of goes back to this history, like this historical thing that happened, which I love that component as well. And so she ends up accidentally summoning this demon, Leon, and he's basically like her only chance at surviving. And they end up falling in love. Of course, it's a romance. But yeah, they're trying to stop this cult who are trying to rise this big bad evil, essentially. There's other like demon entities, the Eld, and there's a Reaper, and like really creepy things, which I absolutely loved. I ate that part up. I love the plot and the main story of this. And I know it's a dark romance. I know it's meant to be smutty, but honestly, the smut got in the way of the enjoyment of the book because the plot was so good. And my whole family agreed on that. Like, none of us were particularly big fans of the smut, but we loved like the plot line in the book. So that's why that's only a 4-star, is basically the smut kind of took me out of it. And the main character is actually very, very annoying. Like, she's supposed to be badass, but she just wants Leon to save her, and then she makes like, he's trying to help her, and she makes stupid decisions, like running out to the demons. Like, come on, dude. Like you're all whiny and damsel in distress, but then you make stupid choices. Like, either be a badass or listen. Like, one or the two. But there is a cute cat named Cheesecake in here, which I loved. And I think I'm going to enjoy the other books more. Like, the smut element may still kind of detract from the story, but I'm going to like the characters more, I'm pretty sure, because I know who they are from this book. So I already have the next 2 ready to go. The next one didn't get picked. I put it as an option for our April choice. It didn't get picked, but I think at least my sister and I are going to read it and kind of discuss it a little bit. And my mom might as well, because she also already got the next 2 to continue. But yeah, the smut kind of detracted, and the main character was not likable. So there's that one. Then we have... This one was one of the ones I pulled out of my series jar. And so it's one of my priority series to complete this year. And that is book 2 of The Scholomance, which is The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. So basically in this one you have Elle, and in this world the adolescents are sent to this school because once they kind of hit puberty, these monsters that are attracted to mana are really drawn to the adolescent wizards, and so they go to the school to help protect them until they reach adulthood. Only the school, the monsters are there as well, and so it's basically, there's kind of these elite wizards that have enclaves. And so they created the school for their children, but their children were still dying, so then they opened it to all the wizard children, basically thinking the ones that aren't part of these enclaves are going to act as fodder to help protect the enclave kids. So you kind of have the elite kids and then kind of the nobody kids, essentially. And so Elle was always an outcast. And then in the first book, she's very powerful. Like, she's very powerful. She has to be careful, because her magic can kind of just go off the rails. And so she has to be really, really careful. And so she's kind of an outcast, and then the previous year she starts kind of making friends, and so she has friends in this one. And then there's also a golden boy in her group, and he's special because he's able to take the mana from these monsters, these mouths. He's able to, when he kills them, take that mana, and it helps pool his enclave pool because he's from New York. And so, but he's been saving a bunch of kids, so not as many kids have died. And so there's less resources in this school because more kids should have died. And there's more kids that need to graduate and everything like that. And so in this one, she's now a senior. And so it's their graduation year. Um, but yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. Kind of similar feelings to the first one. It is kind of slow, because you're going through a school year. And then this one, based on the events of the other one, there's things that have changed a little bit. But I actually really like her, and I don't remember what his name is. Um, I'm horrible with names, but I like her and the relationship with like the golden boy. I really like that. I liked her friendship. The way they kind of call her out on her stupidity. I love that. The way she's kind of grumpy, but does kind of have a kind heart. And they have little mice companions in this one, which I absolutely adored. I love mice, and so I enjoyed that aspect as well. There's just something that I just don't fully love about these, which is why neither the first one or this one got 5 stars, but still really, really enjoyable. So I can't wait to read the last one. Then we had This Was My Punishment roll since I did not finish January's TBR. This is what came up, and I put it on February's TBR, and that's another series that I would like to continue, and that is book 2 of the Red Rising series, which is Golden Sun. Originally it's supposed to be a trilogy. Of course, there's more books than that now. Depending on how the third one goes, I actually might stop there and just read it as a trilogy versus continuing on. But we'll just see when I get to the third one how that goes. So basically, in this world, you have Darrow, and he is a red, and the reds are like the bottom of the barrel, and they are underneath the Earth and Mars mining. Again, you have that mining element. And they are told they're mining to eventually terraform Mars and make it habitable for the rest of humanity. So the work they're doing is to help humanity, but they are never told that Mars has actually been habitated for hundreds of years at this point. And so basically, in the first one, not really spoiler, it happens right at the beginning, his wife dies. And then this group of rebels kind of enlist him and genetically modify him to make him into a gold and infiltrate the gold ranks. And so he gets sent to this institute where the gold children get sent, essentially. And so he's trying to rise to the ranks. So this is taking place, of course, it's like 2 years after Red Rising. And he's just continuing to try to infiltrate the gold and help the rebellion and everything like that. This one is not really my type of. So it's really actually accessible as far as sci-fi goes. I think it's very well written, very accessible, not overly complicated or anything like that. But kind of the political aspect and the war aspect is just not really my thing. And I don't know what it is about this one. I think it's because it's more like focused on like strategy and such than like other political and war type fantasies. Like I've never really read a war type sci-fi, but fantasies I've enjoyed those. So I think it's just because more it's based like it's focusing more on like the strategy and the militant type versus just the war itself and like the everyday people. I think that's what's not really my thing. And also there's just a lot of characters. And like I don't think it's been that long. I don't remember when I read Red Rising, but I really don't think it's been that long. And I had trouble with the characters in the first book, and this one you're not only having the characters that are still apart, and there is a list. There is, a list of who's who, and it has like the different colors and such, and their role in the society. And then it has, the different houses and important people and such. So it does have that, but that didn't really help me out all that much. I mean, I figured out like the main players, but I couldn't really remember them from the first book and the things. Like, I had vague idea of what happened in the first book, and so when they referenced certain things, I was like, okay, I kind of remember that. But they would reference the characters that are no longer in the second book from the first book, and I'm like, huh? I don't know who that is. Like, I have no clue. And so it was a lot of characters and then kind of not being my cup of tea, but it is really, really well written. And I think it could be, and it is 5 stars for a lot of people. It just doesn't quite hit that for me personally. So there is that one. Then we have Hansel and Gretel, and it was misleading. Are you gonna focus? Misleading antagonist. And for this one, because obviously the witch, they're like, oh, a candy witch, like, yay. And so for this one, I kind of looked it up. Misleading antagonist doesn't really come up. But this one, I found something and it said Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. And so this is the one I chose for that prompt. And it does really, really work for sure. And so basically you have Bree, I think. Yeah, Bree. And her mom dies tragically, and she ends up going to this early college program, and where she lives on campus. Like, she's still a high school student, but she lives on campus and takes certain courses and such. And her first night there, she witnesses something, and this mage tries to erase her memories, which doesn't take and unlocks a memory from her mother's death. And so she basically infiltrates the secret society trying to figure out what happened to her mother. And the secret society is based on King Arthur and his knights, like they're descendants from those people. And so you have these Legendborn, which are the descendants of King Arthur and his knights. And so Bree kind of becomes a part of it. And this one would have been a 5 star if it wasn't for the beginning. The beginning was rough. I actually almost DNF'd this. So the beginning, there's a lot of over explanation of the society's hierarchy and the magic and such, and it just bogged it down, and I was just like, I don't think I can get through this. Like, this is too much. But I kept reading because there was a little bit of something, and that's about 150-ish pages of that, just over explanation of everything. It did not need to be that complicated. And then you kind of really get into the story itself, and I loved the rest of the book. I love Bree as a character, and there's also kind of a duality to it too, is you have like the secret society, these demons that are coming, and such, and you also have Bree learning about her magic and her roots and her mom and such, and like her past and where her magic comes from. So you kind of have a duality there, which I didn't love at first. I thought like every time it would switch, I'm like kind of, okay, it feels like I'm reading 2 different stories, but it does wrap up, and the author does a good job of, bringing those two stories together in the end. But it doesn't feel like that at first. It feels like you're kind of reading 2 stories. And so I really like that there's a lot of social commentary again, which I like how it was done in here, on race and racism and such, and like history in the South and whatnot. And yeah, I ended up absolutely loving this. I loved Bree. I loved her character. She definitely, has some faults. I love her best friend and roommate, Alice. I was a little worried Alice was going to get left behind in the story, but fortunately that did not happen. There's kind of a little bit of a love triangle in this, and I have my thoughts on who I want her to end up with and who I think she might end up with. But I don't know for sure. Obviously, the third one does come out this month, so I definitely want to get to the second one. And plus, it ends kind of on a cliffhanger, so I need to get to the second one, and then I can pick up the third one right away too because it comes out this month. So this is definitely a series I want to continue on with because I loved, like I said, once we got through kind of the bog of, over explaining the magic and the hierarchy and everything, like I love the story itself. Like I really, really enjoyed this. And I don't think we're going to have that problem with the second and third book because she's already established it in the first book, which I'm hoping those ones will end up being 5 stars based on my thoughts on this one. So, really enjoyed that one, obviously. Then we have this one is technically 4.5. And that is another extra one. So, this one I hauled recently and I wasn't planning on reading it like anytime soon. But then Chris at Chris's Corner, again, channel will be linked down below. They do like a queer book club, and this one was the choice for February. And I was like, I just hauled that book. Like, I really want to read it because I think I'm going to love it. So it was an extra. And then it also worked for Amy at A Star Reads. Her viewer prompt, it works for that. So I was like, well, sweet, because it was a book about books, and that is The Library of the Unwritten by AJ Hackwith. So this was very close to being 5 stars. And the only reason it wasn't, there was something, and I'm pretty sure it was how many point of views we had. I think that's what kind of like I just couldn't fully get into the story. And I think it's because it kept switching point of views, and so it wasn't very like smooth transitions. And I think several of the point of views were unnecessary, like at least 2 of them. I think if she had just done our main librarian Claire and then the angel, I think it would have worked fine. Or they them, I think is as this author's pronouns. But anyway, I think if they had done that, it would have worked better for me. Because there was just something like I just couldn't fully immerse myself in the story like I wanted to, and I think that's what it was, because you start getting into it, and then it changed point of view, and I'm like, okay, now we're over here, like what's going on? So basically, in this one, there's a place in hell where all the unwritten books go. So all the unwritten books go to this library that is in hell, and Claire, our main character, is Hell's librarian. So she's responsible for all these unwritten books, but these books have a life. And occasionally a book will get restless and it will escape. And so she has to go, track it down. And so this book escapes, and she goes to track it down. And it's her, the demon that kind of brought this message to her about this book that's off. He plays a part, and then there's also Brevity, who is a muse, who's her assistant. And so it's just her and the demon at first. Brevity gets sent back to the library, and they get approached by this angel, and the angel thinks that the book they're after is this like codex, and so they're a little bit confused and such, and then it ends up they go on this adventure trying to find this codex before the angels do. So it's kind of a heaven and hell type situation. And there's one scene where they're in Valhalla, which I absolutely love, and there's like this battle with words. I ate that scene up. Like, that is my favorite scene from the whole book. Like, I absolutely love it. So you have that questing aspect. You have like all these different characters. There's a demon. There's the muse. There's the hero. They call him Hero. And he's from the book that got restless and went off. Like, basically the book one of the characters will kind of come out to life. And there's the other like courier demon. There's just a lot of fun characters. I liked the way they played off of each other. I liked the plot of the book. Like I said, there was just something like I just couldn't fully immerse myself in it, and I think it was all those point of views and jumping between them. I think that's what did it. But I absolutely loved this book. So there's that one. now we're into our 5-star reads. So first up, we have Little Mermaid and its paternal main character. And so for this one, this is the second book and the reason why I read The Soulmate Equation, and that's The True Love Experiment, again by Christina Lauren. So in this one, we're following Fizzy, which is the character's best friend. And she's a romance author, and she's just kind of disillusioned. Like, she gets invited to give this commencement speech at a college, and she's realizing, like, like, I talk the talk, but I don't walk the walk. And so she's just kind of having trouble writing, like, in a writer's slump, like, just blocked, and just kind of disillusioned. Well, she gets approached by this producer who is a single father, and he asks her, to do this dating reality TV show. And so she overhears him saying something, and he kind of looks very like, she calls him Ken or something like that, like his hair's all perfect, and so she kind of just like doesn't get a good first impression essentially, and overhears him say something, and she decides, you know what, I'm gonna do this because I want the show done right essentially. And so she agrees to it, but she's like, only if you agree to a few demands. And so she basically makes him find these archetypes of different people. And I love the premise. Like, I love the reality dating show. I love these two main characters together. I really, really enjoyed them. And I thought the conflict was done well. I enjoyed how it played out, how it got resolved and everything like that, because basically she's supposed to be dating these other men, but she falls for this producer. And so yeah, I had a great time with this. And so there's that one. Then we have, this one was another bookworm, and it was recommended by favored author. And so the way I do this is I basically go on Goodreads and I look at some of my favorite authors. So in this case, I went with Trisha Levenseller because I've been really enjoying that author's writing. And so I just go on their Goodreads and I see their shelves, their want to read, their read, and such. And so this one was on the want to read list, but it's one I was really looking forward to because it just came out February 11th, and that is Scythe and Sparrow by Brynne Weaver. This is the third book in the Ruinous Love trilogy. I had a feeling this was going to be my favorite, and it did not disappoint. So I loved Butcher and Blackbird, which is the first book. I really enjoyed that one. I liked the characters. I liked the way they played off each other. Leather and Lark, I still gave 5 stars. I enjoyed the writing and the story, but they weren't my favorite. I just didn't really connect to those characters. Where I had a feeling I would really enjoy this because this follows the third brother, who is Fionn. And we have Rose. So it does overlap with the other two timeline-wise, because it kind of goes back, to show how Fionn and Rose kind of met and got together and such. So Rose is a circus performer. She does the motorcycle ring of death thing. And basically she ends up trying to murder somebody and her leg gets broken. And so she breaks into Fionn's place, and that's how they meet, because Fionn's a doctor. And so all these books are kind of serial killer romance. So definitely check trigger warnings. There is murder, but it's really lighthearted. This one, each one kind of deals with like a little bit of darker, heavy topics. In this case, it's like domestic violence, so keep that in mind. And so you have Rose, and she's, killing these people, and Fionn kind of has to get her out of trouble. But I like these two because they weren't as hardcore as the other ones. Like these, I could see myself being friends with them despite their extracurricular activities. And Fiona in particular, like, he has a darkness to him, but he really tries to suppress that and do good by, being a doctor and such. Um, and yeah, I love these two together. I listen to it on audio because I really like the way the audio narration is done. Because you have two narrators, one, for Fiona, one for Rose, but like most audiobooks that have dual narration will, okay, it's, say it's Rose's point of view, the female narrator does all the dialect, even if it's the man speaking, where in this case, the the other narrator interjects, which I really like because it's playing back and forth. I absolutely love that aspect of these audiobooks. But yeah, I love these. I love the circus aspect. I love the characters. I love the way they work together. Um, and I just enjoyed the whole thing. So there is that one. Then we had an extra one, and this is just one of the books from my priority TBR for 2025. I was just trying to get one of the priority books on there, and I went with Starling House by Alex E. Haro. And the vibes of this one, again, just absolutely ate it up. So basically, you have Opal, excuse me, and so they're in this small town, and it's her and her brother, and they're living in this motel because their mom has died. And the small town has Starling House, who has this author that lived there, which Opal loves. She wrote The Underworld or something like that. And Opal absolutely loves that book. And she's always kind of been drawn to this house. Something happens and she ends up, going to work for the current caretaker of the house, Arthur Starling. And so he's the caretaker of the house, but he's very grumpy, it's like not very talkative, just, come do your work and then go. And she's trying to raise money to get her little brother out of the town because it is a mining town. So again, you have that mining aspect. And he has asthma, and so she just wants him out of the town. So she's really trying to raise money to get him out. And so she goes to work as housekeeping. But this house has a sentient aspect, which I absolutely love. I love the way the characters play off the house. Like especially with Arthur, it's kind of like a sibling relationship almost, which makes sense. And so yeah, you have this, but there's something more going on with this house, and with Arthur in particular, which Opal has to kind of learn. I love the relationship between Opal and Jasper. I like the relationship between Opal and Arthur and that romance that develops. Really enjoyed that. And then at the end, it jumps and you get a different point of view, which I really enjoyed as well. There's kind of town secrets that come to light as well. And it's just a good time. I enjoyed everything about this book. I love the vibes. And I know it's had some mixed reviews, but personally for me, this is my favorite. I've read The Once and Future Witches. I've read The 10,000 Doors of January. 10,000 Doors of January was kind of a letdown. I didn't fully love it. I enjoyed it. I didn't fully love it. Love The Once and Future Witches. This is my favorite. Like, it had all the vibes that I wanted. I liked the characters. I liked the way they interacted. The house was awesome. So yeah, there's that. And there's a cat named Hellcat, which I also love. Well, Hellcat initially, and then she gets a name, which is fun. Then the next book was for Cinderella, and it's Undercover or Disguised. I know it doesn't want to the focus. And for that one, I went with Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas, which is book 2/3 in the Throne of Glass series. I read the little prequel novellas first, so this is technically the third book I'm reading, but it is book 2 in the main series. And so in these we have Selena, and she is an assassin. And in the first book, she is doing a contest to basically become the king's assassin. And so this is following the events of that, but there's kind of more to Selena's history. There was a spoiler a couple ones that I knew going in. But me personally, I don't mind spoilers, so it didn't ruin the story for me. Like, to me, it's about the journey that got to that point. So spoilers often make me more excited, which in this case, I was like, okay, how do we get to those 2 points? Because there was 2 spoilers that I already knew going in. But yeah, we're just following Selena and her time in this kingdom. And she's an assassin, so obviously that requires kind of disguise and going undercover. And I'm eating the series up. I read ACOTAR, didn't love it, wasn't planning on reading anything else by this author, but then I found that little prequel novella, The Assassin's Blade, at a thrift store, gave it a try, fell in love with the character, and I'm really enjoying following the story. I do have the third one on the way, so hopefully third/fourth one. Hopefully I can get it on a TBR soon. Because I'm loving the series. So there's that. Then number 1 spot goes to another one that came out in February, on February 11th, same day as Scythe and Sparrow. And this one was a bookworm, and it was supposed to be spring themed, but I originally chose this book because on Goodreads, I think it's the UK cover, and it's very pink, very bright. And so I thought, oh, perfect, it's spring themed. But really, these books, like the other 2 haven't been, and I wasn't sure. So I did go ahead and use one of my reward tokens just to forego the honey jar prompt, just in case. And this one, it's kind of like between summer and winter, because there's like a summer aspect, but there's also a wintry aspect. So I guess I could have tweaked it to make it work for spring theme, but I'm just going to kind of stick by using the reward. And that's Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales, which is book 3 in the Emily Wilde series by Heather Fawcett. This is another one I listened to because I really, really love the narrators for these books. You have Elle Potter and Michael Dodds are the narrators. I forgot to say Scythe and Sparrow. It's Eric Nolan and Samantha Brentmoor, who are the same narrators that did book 2, but not book 1. And then this one has had the same narrators throughout. But I originally listened to the first one and loved the narrators, and so I've continued to listen to them. And I love this series so much. Cozy fantasy. You have Emily, and she's kind of an academic scholar who studies fairies. And so in the first book, she's doing an encyclopedia, and there's this one fairy type that she doesn't have really a lot of information on, so she goes to like this wintry place to learn more about these fairies. And then the second one kind of continues from there. And then this third one I really liked because you have Wendell, who is her academic rival, and their relationship. I liked how their relationship has evolved and where they are at this point. They are mostly in fairy at this point, and I really liked how Emily is having to navigate like fairy politics and like just figure out her knowledge, like how to use the knowledge that she's collected and the stories that she knows really well, which play a part because there's a curse on this kingdom in fairy, and so they're having to try to break this curse. And so much fun. One of my favorite components of this was she has this dog Shadow. There's also a cat companion at this point, but she has this dog Shadow who's not really a dog, but for all intents and purposes, like he's a dog. But he's senior at this point, and I loved how the author captured that, because my I have Boo Boo's kind of a senior, but it really reminded me of my dog Shunka, who I think we had to put her down in 2020, so it's been 5 years now. But she was with me from the time I was 18 all the way into my 30s, so she was with me a long time, and it just really made me think of that, and the love of a senior dog, and that relationship is just so bittersweet. And the author captured that very, very, very well. I love that component. I love the narrators. I love Emily. Like, the plot of this was perfect. The relationship with Wendell and the way they interact are perfect. You have some characters from the previous book that were back, which I really enjoyed. I loved everything about this and I ate it up, which is obviously why it's number one. As far as enjoyment goes. So those are all the books. But as far as top three, in the third spot, I went with Where'd You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple. I like the epistolary slash mixed media. I love that format. I think it works really well for my personal taste, and everything I've read that has that format, even if I don't particularly like the book itself or the story, I've enjoyed the format. So that's one of the reasons it's up there. I like that family element and the mental health rep and everything like that, and the way they kind of play off each other, especially the daughter B. Like, you kind of see this roller coaster, and how supportive, like, she just accepts her mom for who her mama is, and you also see a little bit of her relationship, like the ups and downs with her dad as well, which I really enjoyed. And then you have this Antarctic element, which I loved. So that was number three. Number two, I actually gave to The Road. So even though I didn't like the writing and such, like, it's gonna stick with me, for sure. I love the pacing. Like I said, the pacing is very slow, but it works. It's kind of slow, but it's also fast because it's a short book and it reads really fast based on how it's told in snippets. But as far as like the pacing of the plot and such, it's slow. I love the dystopian aspect. Like, what I've read, I haven't read a lot of dystopian, but what I have read, I've been enjoying. The father and son relationship, and kind of that question of like survival and what you would do for your kid and such. Like, I absolutely love that. And then number one, I actually gave to The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. The books and the characters, like, because the book are characters in and of themselves, I really like that, and the other characters that were part of this story I really enjoyed. The setting, like being in hell, and then the quest aspect, I enjoyed both those components. I liked the questing, on the different places they went. Like, the setting was fantastic, and that Valhalla scene, like, it just that scene is going to stick with me. I loved it. It was perfection. Like, the word battle, like, oh, I loved it so much. And so that's why it got the number one spot. So that is it for my wrap up. The sun's starting to go down. It's getting a little dark. I would love to know if you've read any of these books, if you're interested in reading any of these books, or what your favorite book from February was. You can leave that down in the comments below. If you don't know what to comment, or you just want to help support the channel by commenting, and let me know you were here, you can always leave a rabbit or any type of animal emoji. I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.